Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
All right, thanks a lot, Nicola. Yeah, well, good morning, everybody. I hope that you're awake. I know it's the first lecture in the morning. It's never the best slot. But anyway, so as Nicola said, I do research on cybercrime broadly. So anything from malware to frauds and so on. Taking a data-driven approach, which means that I do large-scale measurements to better understand the problem and develop techniques to basically fight it. Both in conjunction with industries or from the industrial point of view, so how do you basically identify malicious activity and block it, which is what I will talk about today a little bit, as well as in conjunction with law enforcement. So how do you identify, who's behind the botnets, for example, and take it down or arrest the person and so forth. So today, to fit the scope of NCase a little better, I will focus on the social network part of things. So how basically cyber criminals are abusing social networks for profit and how we can stop them. And I will go through past research, not only by myself, but by the broader research community to see, what kind of techniques we can use to identify and block this kind of activity. But first, I want to start with a more, historic perspective. So, online abuse has been around since basically the internet. So the very first spam email was sent in the 70s. It was a general marketing email, and it was basically if you were on the internet at the time, you would have received it, right? There were not many people on the internet at the time. But so email has been a vehicle for abuse for a very long time, and it's used for a number of reasons. So it can be used to send spam, so send billions of emails, basically, we're talking about billions really, to advertise goods that can just be cheap goods, counterfeit goods, illicit goods, and so forth. Or it can be used to spread malware, so you will receive a link, you click on it to get infected, and so on. It can be used to perform frauds, so the typical advanced fee frauds, the Nigerian scams. I have a lot of money, and I just need you to pay a small fee, and then you will get millions, or things like that. That's been going around forever. Romance scams, which have a little more to do with dating. So people target typically lonely older women, for example, and try to establish a relationship with them. And eventually they will build up stories that will require them to pay money, for example, to come visit them or to help their family or things like that. And then there is phishing. You receive an email from Facebook saying that you should reset your password, and it's not really Facebook, so they're giving your password away to cyber criminals. So this has been going on around for a while, but recently, and with recently I mean in the last 8 years maybe, we've seen a shift from traditional email to social networks. So the same exact scams are happening on social networks. And there are reasons for that. So, email abuse is still going around, but basically criminals face a big challenge to perform this kind of operation successfully. So what do you think this is? The main challenge that they're facing? Yes, that's one. There is research showing that basically the conversion rate of spam is 0.0001% or something like that, because 99.9% will be blocked by antivirus, anti-spam, and so on, and then people who actually fall for the scams will be even smaller, right? So that is one reason. But there are other reasons. Yeah, exactly. So this is basically the main reason that makes social networks appealing. So there is research, in which I collaborated, that shows that the main challenge that criminals using email have is actually to find a good list of victim addresses. So they can buy these email lists on the dark web or wherever, the underground, and these lists are typically very bad. So many of the addresses there, up to 30%, do not exist. And these people are operating on extremely thin margins because, as I said, their conversion rate is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent. And so if their botnets, for example, waste a lot of time sending emails to addresses that do not exist, well, then they will not make any money. And this is a big problem. And so social networks are different there because basically, you can find victims automatically. It's embedded in the social network. If you create an account on Facebook, then you can search for people, and everybody you find is a real account. At least it's an existing account. It might be a fake account, but it's an existing account. So this is very different. And you can also target people with a very high granularity. So Facebook has this graph search functionality, so you can search for people in Cyprus who like whatever, and tailor your scam to only people who have a higher chance to fall for these scams. And so, this is the main advantage, really. There is also another advantage that social network accounts come with a reputation associated to them. Think about, the number of friends that someone has, the number of followers, how many retweets they get, these kind of things. And this trust, as I will show you, can be manipulated. So there are services that basically, once you create your fake accounts, you can pay these services to give you followers, to give you likes, and things like that. So that if you try and perpetrate a fraud against someone, you will look believable because suddenly you have 10,000 followers, so you look like a real legitimate account. So social network abuse happens similarly to email abuse, except that this time we need to have fake accounts. So with email abuse, you just send emails directly, typically through infected computers. So infected computers will send millions of emails a day, and that's it. Here you need to have some accounts in between that the criminal controls, that they will then send messages to everybody else. And they will be used to perform the same kind of scams that I just said, the same exact things, just through social networks. So now the first question we need to answer really is, where do these misused accounts come from? So if you see these accounts that are posting spam, malware, phishing, and so on, what are they? Are they real accounts? Are they fake accounts? What do you think? Yeah, the correct answer is both, but mostly fake accounts, or at least at the beginning they were predominantly fake accounts. So a criminal will basically create a number of fake accounts or buy them on the black market. As you can imagine, creating fake accounts is an extremely tedious process, and social networks are really trying to make it hard. So if you create many accounts in a row, they will identify that you're creating many accounts in a row, and they will shut them down. They will start asking for phone numbers. They will start asking for you to solve CAPTCHAs. And so the easiest thing really is to buy them already created. There are people who specialize in creating fake accounts, and they can sell them for cheap. So you can probably buy 1,000 accounts for $10 or something like that. There are also some auxiliary services that are there to help you create fake accounts. So if you need a phone number, there are services that use VoIP that you can pay to relay the messages that you will receive. You will receive a code through a message. You basically rent this number for an hour or something, and then you get all these messages and you can create accounts. There are services that are solving CAPTCHAs for you, and these can be either crowdsourcing, Mechanical Turk type of services. So there are people who are paid to solve CAPTCHAs, or can be powered by malware. So there will be malware that will inject CAPTCHAs in your browser without you knowing, and you're expecting to see CAPTCHAs every once in a while, so you will just solve them. But actually what you're solving is helping the criminal creating these accounts. So once a criminal has a fake account created, what do they need to do to start spreading malicious messages? Yes, yes. So if you're on Facebook, you will start, friending people, sending friends requests, and surprisingly, some of them will actually accept this friend request because maybe they're lonely people, maybe the fake account looks particularly attractive or something like that. Maybe they just look for popularity, whatever reasons. But you would be surprised by how many people actually accept any friend request they receive. And once these requests are actually established, so these connections are actually established, the criminal can start sending malicious messages to these people. So now, this is something that can look suspicious. So this activity of sending a lot of connections, and then only a few of them are actually acknowledged, is something that is very, very suspicious. And social networks have detectors in place that actually identify this kind of activity and can block you. If you send friendship requests to 10,000 people and only 3 people reply, accept it, and so on. But this is not the case in all domains. So I've been doing research on online dating frauds. And if you think about online dating sites, the way the way people use it is completely different. So suddenly somebody sending messages to 1,000 people is not that suspicious anymore because that's what everybody's doing. That is what the site is designed to do, to allow, right? And also, the whole anti-spam field is based on the fact that messages are unsolicited. So if you receive a message that you didn't ask for, that's likely to be spam. But in the online dating domain, actually, every single message you receive is unsolicited, right? So you can see that, the techniques that I will explain to you today work, but work in the social network domain. They don't necessarily work everywhere. So this is why, depending on where we work, we need to develop new techniques and so on. So, well, what do we do to block these fake accounts? And here I made the first mistake. There are 3 schools of thought, and there are actually 4. But I will fix that. Anyways, there are 4 different, broad categories of fake account detection systems that have been proposed in research. And these are basically, very different ways of looking at the problem. And the way that the industry, so Facebook, Google, and whatnot, are going about this is to basically apply a defense in-depth approach. So they will use different detectors, put them on one after the other with the idea that at least one of them will catch some malicious activity. Because as we will see, criminals can actually adapt and evade many of these techniques, but the idea is that they will not be able to evade all of them at the same time. And also when you talk to the industry, they're very, very worried about false positives. So, if you're Facebook and suddenly you block an account that you shouldn't have blocked, well, that person might actually get upset and leave the platform and go to one of your competitors, which is a problem for them. So, what they would actually rather have is a system that maybe doesn't catch all malicious accounts, catches only a fraction, but never has a false positive. So by doing that, you can actually deploy the system, be sure that you reduce the magnitude of the problem. So instead of having 1,000 fake accounts, you will suddenly have 700 or something, but you will never make the mistake of flagging something as malicious. And then maybe there is another detector that still detects 20%, a different 20%, but has no false positives and so on. So you can put them together. So I will start with account-based methods, which are probably the oldest ones that have been proposed, as social networks started appearing. So we are talking about 2009, 2010, and so on. So these methods basically look at accounts, the characteristics of an account, and then basically perform some classification. So they apply machine learning techniques to distinguish between a legitimate and a fake account. Okay. There are very different characteristics that you look at, but are there any that you can think of that would make an account clearly look suspicious? Yeah. Sorry? Yeah. That's a good one. They might not have photos at all, so they might just have a profile picture as well, right? Or they might not have a long history. So something that a fake account cannot fake is the time it was created. So criminals want to make money quickly, and so they cannot afford to create an account and waste 10 years and post a message every day or something and then start doing something. Unless the reward is very, very high. So if they want to perform a targeted attack and scam the CEO of a company of $1 million or something, that's maybe worth it. But if I just want to sell you something and the return is very, very low because they will try and contact 10,000 people and only 5 of them will buy something, then it's not worth it anymore. So yeah, that's yeah.
Maybe they have added a lot of friends in the social media.
Yes. So that is also something that's suspicious. Although you need to think, if you create a new Facebook profile, maybe you start adding everybody you know right away, right?
But
yeah, of course. Yeah, you need to put a threshold somewhere. Also, if you have a social network, you can see the fraction between the requests that they make and the ones that are accepted. And this fraction is likely to be very, very different for legitimate and fake accounts. So if you're a real person and you try to connect to everybody you knew in kindergarten, elementary school and whatnot, most of these people are likely to acknowledge your request. While if you're a random person that nobody knows, actually, many of these people will not acknowledge this request. Anything else?
Probably they don't have any personality. Understand them as different words.
So when you say message-based methods,
Those, I will get to it, but they are basically similar to spam detection methods. So they look at similar messages being sent by many accounts, kind of.
So going back to your question for this one, when you say account-based, doesn't involve different types of...
It does, but on an account-by-account basis. So if, for example, you have an account that's sending the same message over and over, that would clearly be suspicious.
Like the account-based method?
Yes. Because you look at a single account. These categories I made them up, so they're not completely strict, but yeah. Something else that we saw back in the day was that basically when you have a fake account, you typically have a bot attached to it. And these bots will start looking for people by looking at dictionaries of common names. So they take the most popular names in the English language, for example, and they start targeting them and all of that. So if you look at their list of friends, you will see that there is a suspicious distribution of people with a certain name, for example, because they use a dictionary and they didn't include all the possible names and so on. Some other characteristics, as I said, the age of the account, so you cannot make an account and wait for a long time before selling it, unless maybe you're a service selling account, so you can sort of, like when you make wine, you make the wine, you wait for a while, and then you sell the wine from the year before or something like that. So they could do that. You could look for the number, as I said, the fraction between the number of requests made and the number of requests acknowledged. if you're not Facebook, you cannot see that, but on Twitter you can, because you can see the number of followers that the account follows and the number of friends that are the ones that follow back, right? So you can clearly see this. You can look at the message similarity. As we saw, you can look at the number of likes, the number of retweets, and whatnot. You can look at account metadata. So you can look at the language of an account, their location, and whatnot. You can look at patterns in the posting time. So there is a lot of research showing that people follow, a diurnal pattern, so mostly post during the day and rarely post during night and all of that. And maybe you see something suspicious here. Then you can also look at sentiment features. So, what kind of content do they post and whatnot. You can look at the URLs that they are posting. Are they always posted to the same domain? Because if they're advertising a product, they're likely to be posting always the same domain. Now, there is a lot of research detecting malicious domains, so criminals are changing their domain continuously. But there is also research detecting domains that are created algorithmically. So if you use the same template over and over, for example, you have 10 random characters, .info, or something like that, then you can see that this is a suspicious domain being posted. And then the list goes on, and this is research that is still ongoing. So, for example, talking about the online dating fraud, we have a paper under submission right now, which we try to identify scam profiles from real profiles. And we have characteristics that are, both from the demographics. So, for example, a lot of these scammers pretend to be coming from the military, because their story is that they are, a soldier somewhere in Iraq, let's say, and they establish these long-distance relationships. And the reason for not meeting the victim is that they are in the military, right? So this sort of builds on their story a lot. We are also using deep learning to extract what is in their profile picture. So there is this framework from Google, which I don't remember the name, but it basically tells you that this is a person standing on a boat or whatever. This is someone sitting by their computer and so on. And you can use these characteristics as features to identify fake profiles from real profiles as well. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, that's true. Although many fake accounts are actually deleting their messages periodically. So they will post, spam messages, and then we will delete them all, and then we will post again. So if you have a social network, you have a history of that. But if you are not, when you come to a profile, the old messages might be gone. So it's tricky. And the reason for that is also that these profiles might be sold to other people. So let's say that they are sold to someone who's advertising, prescription drugs, and then they are sold to someone else that's advertising something else. So all the messages will be deleted, and the new ones will be posted. So it can be tricky. But yeah, as a case study, we had this paper at EXAC in 2010, which was really using most of these features for detection, and it was using a random forest classifier to distinguish between real accounts and fake accounts. So the way we went about this, we created 100 fake accounts on Twitter. They didn't do anything, but what they did was attracting a lot of spammers. Because back in the day, spammers would just aggressively follow people, and every time somebody would follow us, we would follow them back and start scrolling their accounts, what they were posting, and all of that. And the assumption here is that any account contacting us is a fake account. This is a wrong assumption. We actually went manually through all these accounts, and many of them were real people who were just desperate to become popular or whatever. We did the same experiment on Facebook, and we picked random first names and last names. And so it turned out that some combination of names that we picked was a real person, and somebody started following, making friends requests to these people. And there is also research showing that people never check if they're already friends with someone. So if you are already friends with me, but then you get a friend suggestion from someone who has my same name and my same picture, you will accept it most of the time. So that's more dealing with targeted attacks. But if this name just appeared to in someone's friends request, they would friend it, and so we had to basically clean up this list manually quite a bit. But then basically at the end of the story, we detected 15,000, I think, Twitter spammers. We had a crawler that was going around, and we were limited in doing that or whatever. But it was basically one of the very first systems doing that. And we were reporting a 0.4% false detection rate. So very low, as we will see, much lower than most other academic systems, but maybe not as good enough for being used in the industry. The industry really would like this number to be 0 or 0.001% or something like that, because if you think about a service with hundreds of millions of people, 0.4% is still a large number. So this worked. It worked back in 2010, at least. But there are challenges here. So what is the challenge that you can see in developing this, in deploying this kind of system? So let's say we develop this system, we deploy it on Twitter. What will happen next? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the main challenges. But suppose that that is not a problem. That we can basically, social networks have people actually vetting the accounts that get detected to see if they're real bad accounts or not. Yes. So that's the main problem. So when you develop a security system, the main issue is evasion. So the fact that criminals can actually learn what you're doing and adapt in a way that you will not be detected anymore. And it is fairly easy for them to do that because they will just try and create multiple accounts, and then they will see which ones are detected and which ones are not, and adapt on top of that. In certain settings, they go even beyond. So there are systems that will tell you, that are publicly available, and will tell you if an account is a bot or not, for example. And so criminals will create a number of them, and then they will submit them to the service, and will get the response if it's detected or not. In certain cases, so in the case of email spam, people would rent a botnet, so a network of infected computers, and use it to send spam. And in the dashboard, so the control system for this botnet, they would have a Spam Assassin, which is one of the state-of-the-art spam detection systems, integrated in it, so that they could check if their spam would be detected or not. And if it would be detected, they would just modify it a little bit, try again, until it would basically pass the system. So they're very, very sophisticated in doing that. But besides that, they just adapt by themselves. So there was this paper in 2011, so one year after our EXEC paper, that basically showed that the systems developed a year before were already doing much worse. They were still doing okay, but much worse, just a year after. So you can imagine how this system today would actually do. You need to keep adapting that a lot. So the lesson we learned from developing this kind of system, so these were the early days of malicious account detection, was that you really need to look at elements that the criminal cannot change and base your detection on that. So let's say that, as we said, criminals need to contact a lot of people because they want to sell their product, and only a few of them will contact them back. This is something that they cannot really change. Yes, of course, they can contact less people, but then they will make less money because less people will actually see their messages, right? And so, you are both basing your detection on something that's difficult to change, and also forcing the criminal to make less money because they have to slow down, they have to create more accounts and all of that. And so either your system cannot be evaded, or actually they will give up because they will not make any money anymore. So this is kind of a big idea behind the research that came next. If you have any questions, please stop me at any time. So the second category are these message-based methods. So these are basically methods that look at which messages are sent by accounts. And the difference between the previous account-based methods, in which we still looked at messages sent by account, but we did it on an account-by-account basis. So you look at a single account, what are they posting? When you look at another account, what are they posting? So here, you can actually correlate what is being posted by many accounts. Because what the criminals will want to do is sending the same message or similar messages through many accounts to many people, so that they can actually infect them with malware or sell them products or whatnot. So this category of systems actually looks at many accounts sending the same message or similar messages through in a small amount of time. Let's say that criminals create 1,000 fake accounts, and then they will start a campaign. So they will instruct all these accounts through bots to send messages. And so all these messages will look similar and be sent in a small amount of time. And then the issue you have here is that you have a lot of legitimate activity that looks like that. For instance, applications. So if you use any social application, Foursquare or whatnot, they will post your check-ins. They will say, I'm at Cyprus University of Technology, whatever, posted through Foursquare, and then someone else will post a similar thing with a different location and all of that. So you might very well end up grouping them all together and saying this is spam, while it's actually real users, using a legitimate application. How do you fix that? That's a problem. You can maybe whitelist these applications, because if you have Twitter metadata, you will see this is posted from Foursquare. Let's get rid of that. Let's not consider it malicious. If suddenly you see something that is a malicious application, you might actually consider it as bad. And Twitter applications are an interesting thing to look at, because basically, as I said, criminals will set up accounts and then hook them up with bots. And the easier way to do that is creating an application, authorize it in all the accounts, and then you can automatically post to all these accounts, right? But then it's fairly easy for Twitter to pull the plug. They can just identify that an application is malicious and delete it. And suddenly, the criminals have to start over again. And we see this happening over and over. So we saw a malicious campaign that was using an application that I don't remember the name, but let's say it was fake app or whatever. And every day Twitter would delete it, and they would create a new one. And so you would see fake app, July 20, fake app July 21 or something like that. That was the name of the application. And they would keep doing that over and over. And somehow Twitter didn't realize that, and they would block the application after the activity was performed, but not preemptively. So interesting area to look at. Something else that's interesting, so criminals will post URLs, will post links, because they want people to actually go to web pages, to whatever, infect them with malware, or it will be an e-commerce site selling counterfeit goods, and so on. And so looking at these URLs can be interesting. And in particular, criminals are trying to evade detection And so they will do things like, make, once you click on the link, you get redirected many, many times to sort of confuse analysis systems. And maybe these redirections will change all the time. So there will be domains that are sort of one use only. Or we will iterate through different domains and all of that. And sometimes they will even try and identify if you're a crawler. So if you have a Google crawler, they will redirect you to a harmless domain. But if you're a real user with a real user agent and whatnot, they will direct you to a different malicious, to the real malicious website, right? So there is a lot of interesting research here by looking at basically links that have complex redirection chains that typical legitimate links do not have. And then you can also look at the content of the links. So we will look at basically 3 systems that actually looked at these things in a separated way. So the first one was this paper that was published at IMC in 2011. And as I said, the intuition here is that spammers will send messages in large campaigns. So many messages that all look similar, sent from many accounts in a bursty behavior. So if criminals want to send to sell something now, they will send over advertisements within the next hour or something like that. So this system is definitely interesting. You can check it if you're interested. It reports a 3.9% false detection rate, which is on the high side, but no system is perfect. And also, when you have a machine learning system, you can tune, how accurate you are. So maybe it's a 3.9% false detection rate detecting all the spam. If you detected only half of it, your false detection rate would go down. Then there is this other system, Warning Bird, from a year later, so you can sort of see how the evolution of research went, that looked at these redirection chains that I was describing. So they will basically look at multiple accounts on Twitter, posting links to the same domain, and they will basically visit them and study the redirection chain that was going to it. And they report 1% false positive rate. So this is the false positive rate, not the false detection rate. So when you know the false negatives, you can sort of say, okay, this is actually what we are detecting or what we are missing. Here you have no idea of the false negative rate. So you say, okay, among what we detect, 3.9% is actually false positive, but we have no idea if we are missing, 100,000 malicious accounts or what we are missing. So typically the false positive rate is lower than the false detection rate. And you can do it only when you have a full picture of what's going on. But so this is an example. I'm not sure if you can read it from the back. It's an example of these redirection chains that we were looking at. So you would have 3 Twitter accounts posting different shortened URLs, because of course posting a shortened URL is a way of obfuscating what you are doing. So you can, the user will not know where the URL is going, and will be maybe more likely to click on it rather than you have, malicious.com is clearly a bad account or a bad domain or something like that. And then they will be redirected to 3 different domains that are all .tk domains, so very cheap domains that are probably throwaway. And then these domains will redirect to a single domain. So you see that there is a fan in here. And this is bestfreevideoonline.info, which is probably a compromised website. So somebody compromised a real website and added a malicious web page that is not doing anything but just redirecting the user somewhere else. And then it redirects it to another domain that's also compromised. So you see the same redirect.php page, but on a different domain. So Ray-Ban-sunglasses.com. And then here, the script will try to identify if you're a crawler or not. So if you're a crawler, if you're the Google bot, it will just redirect you to google.com. But if you're a normal browser, the thing will continue. So what the authors were doing, they were pretending to be the Google bot by setting the user agent to the Google bot. They would see that they would be redirected to Google, but then if they were in a real browser, it would actually continue. And this is a clear indicator that there is something weird going on. Because in the real web environment, if you don't want Google to crawl you, you would have a robots.txt file saying, if I Google, don't crawl me, instead of just doing this, right? So this is clearly a suspicious activity. And then it would continue, so it would go to another website, and then it would be redirected to 3 different ones and all of that, and the actual random spam messages would be displayed on different domains, but they would all be the same. So you can see that this is clearly something suspicious that you typically don't see. Now this works very well, but it only works with spam or malicious messages that contain a link. Not all of them do. So you would see malicious messages that are, for example, have a phone number. Just to give an example, and this wouldn't work. And well, the third method really looks at the content of a web page. So this system from IEEE Security and Privacy 2011 was basically going to the final web pages. So let's say, here, these 3 web pages, didn't care about redirections or anything, but would crawl them, get all the words in these pages, and try to figure out what we were talking about. So what they did would, build a bag of words classifier to identify, to distinguish between good and bad web pages. And if you have, keywords that are related to, counterfeit bags or, Viagra or whatnot, you're more likely to be a bad page than a good page. But what is interesting about this paper is that actually they did the maths and they calculated how much it would cost, let's say Twitter at the time, to operate this service in the wild. So they estimated that at the time Twitter would have 15 million URLs posted every day. There are many tweets, but only a fraction contain URLs, and those are the ones that would need to be scanned, and it could do this for $800 a day. So if you're a big company, this is not really too much to protect your platform. By using Amazon AWS, so, maybe if they use their own infrastructure, it would even be cheaper, or maybe not. So, what do you think of all these systems? Could they all be evaded as well, or you think that actually they're strong enough? Well, if you have a human, it's definitely challenging. So this is all automated activity. And the idea is that this automated activity needs to be large scale. Otherwise, the criminals don't make any money. And so, by using these systems, you force them to scale down. And so they will make less money. But yeah, of course, if you have a manual attack or whatever, you can always evade. Yeah. Yeah, of course. Any idea? Yeah, I will get to that later, yes. Well, an issue, for example, here, you scan a URL and you mark it as legitimate or malicious. We did a study with URL shorteners, so going back, these guys use URL shorteners in the first in the first instance they use URL shorteners. So what we did was we shortened the URL, and Bitly will go and check if it's malicious or not before allowing you to do that. So we did that, and then later on, we redirected it to a page that we controlled. Later on, we changed the page to redirect to a page that was actually malicious. It was hosting malware. And since these guys do the check only once, they never identified that as malicious. So, what criminals could do here is, wait for the scanner to visit them. They can even maybe fingerprint the scanner, so they will know that the scanner arrived, and mark the page as safe, and then put the malicious content afterwards, and this system would be evaded. So what should Twitter do? Continuously crawling them, but then this would make the cost skyrocket, because suddenly you wouldn't only have to scan 15 million URLs, but you would have to scan every single URL every posted on Twitter, which clearly is not feasible.
If they increase dramatically the activity that they are doing, so that they force your post to be much higher and
Yeah, that's also a way. So instead of making the malicious activity look smarter, you can just post a lot of benign content. So let's say you go to the trending topic, there is the World Cup final going on, and you post, 1 billion messages pointing to random websites, and then they have to scan them all. That is also, a way of doing that.
the level where you don't create it in the OS, but still flat with
Yeah.
warnings.
Yeah, absolutely. So a way to evade this is difficult to evade. So a way of evading this would be to make the redirection chains simpler. But then, there would be other systems that can actually identify that this is bad. So maybe Twitter wouldn't know that this is bad, that the links you're clicking on are bad. But if you're using Chrome, it will go through every link you click through will go through the safe browsing API. And so if this link is actually always the same, it will be easier to blacklist it. So you have to think that it's not only the social network interested in deleting fake accounts, but there are other security measures in place. Or the domain registrar will identify that this is a malicious domain and block it. This is why they need many, many domains. If they were using the same one, the domain would be taken down. They wouldn't be able to operate. And yeah, if you go to this one, so the message similarity, of course they can make the messages look different in some way, and this clustering would fail. So you would need a more sophisticated clustering or something like that. Yeah, it's challenging, but this is the same problem that anti-spam had. So email spam used to be very, very good at detecting templates, spam that was automatically generated and all of that. Then criminals kept adapting, and now if you look at what Google is doing, for example, they're heavily relying on users voting on emails, whether they're good or bad. This is their main signal, really. So, what is actually in the email became less important than the reputation of an account and all that. But then, every time a new technique gets developed, there is an opportunity for a new illicit operation to start. So there are botnets that actually send spam to each other on their Gmail accounts, and then they go and vote that that is not spam, to mess with the system. And there is somebody who's actually charging people for doing that. So you can see that this is an extremely complex ecosystem that's constantly evolving. But yeah, the idea is that, as I showed here, they need to keep things complex. Otherwise, they will fail in other ways. Okay. Then the next idea is graph-based methods. So far, we didn't look at the social network of accounts. So if you're an account, you have friends, followers or whatever, depending on the social network, you will be embedded in a graph. And so far, we didn't look at that. The only thing we looked at is how many friends you have, how many followers you have, and things like that. So this category of systems, which typically called fake account Sybils, that's just because Sybil detection is a graph-based thing. But basically, the idea here is that by looking at the social graph, you can tell if an account is fake or not, or a Sybil or not. Because a Sybil account will have a difficulty in embedding itself convincingly in the social network. So you will see that these are real accounts. They're mostly all connected to each other, not completely, but they have a very tightly connected network. And then the fake accounts only connect to one of them, or they have a social network of their own, but their connections to the real graph are limited. And so these are called attack edges, because they are the ones that connect the Sybil region from the real social network. And so the idea of these systems is to basically break these edges and isolate and block the fake accounts. So there was this paper from an NSDI 2012 that's called that the system is called SybilRank. Actually, Michael Sirigianos was one of the authors. So maybe I'll say something wrong about it, but he's not here to correct me. But basically, the idea is that you take the social graph and you will perform a short random walk from any account, and see where you end up. Let's say you have two steps. So you take, for example, you take this. You go 2 steps. You do 1, 2. Then you do it again 1, 2. You do again 1, 2. You do it again 1, 2. Whatever. But most of the time, you will end up in the benign region, because there are more links in the benign region, right? So if you're here, you basically have a third of your of a probability to end up to go here, and then a third again to go here. So it's a third over a third to end up in a Sybil region, while ending up in the benign one is much higher, because there are much more nodes there. So that is kind of the idea. And so you perform all these random walks, and then you can rank accounts from their for their probability of being Sybils or not. And you do that by basically ranking them by the probability of a short random walk that starts from a non-Sybil node to end up on this node. What does this mean? It means that you take this account, and then you look at the probability of if you start a random walk from here, what's the probability of ending up here? It is much lower than the probability of starting from here and ending up anywhere else in this region, right? And the same for all the Sybil accounts. Here it will even be lower because it's farther away. Basically, you can only get here from here with a 2-step random walk. So you take all these probabilities and you rank them inversely. So the probability of ending up in a non-Sybil node. So the ones that are on the top will be the ones with the highest probability of ending up in a Sybil node. And so those on the top will be more likely to be Sybils. So this is the idea. And this is a ranking system. So it's not an automated detection system. The idea is that you will have a ranking, and then you will look at, the top ones will most likely be Sybils. But if you start looking at, the node 100,000 or something like that, the probability starts decreasing. And so basically 90% of the lowest ranked nodes among the top 200,000, I think, are Sybils. And this means that this cannot be a completely automated system. There needs to be somebody actually checking it. Or maybe you can combine the two with different systems. So you can take the top ranking nodes that are very likely to be Sybils, and then you can apply another technique from before. But, I don't know, an account-based system or a a message-based system, and so on. There is another interesting paper that's actually from Telefonica that's called Integro. This was published in 2015, and the idea here is that they don't really look at civils anymore, but they look at victims. Their assumption is that certain accounts are more likely to fall for scams and to friend random people. And if you can identify these accounts, so this one is in gray, is the one that friended the civils. If you can identify them, you can clearly identify the attack edge and partition the network and basically delete all the civils. So instead of looking at civil detection, they look at victim detection, which is a similar problem but somewhat different. Now, of course, these systems can be evaded as well. So there was a paper at CCS in 2015. It's basically showing that it's kind of the same problem with the links from before. So if you post a link and it's benign, and then you change it into malicious, and the system only checks once, then you don't get detected. Here, they use the same idea, the fact that civil detection systems look at the system, the network once, but then basically attackers can carefully manipulate the social graph, so build connections, destroy connections, and whatnot, to evade these systems. So they have a couple of them that they analyze, and they show real attacks on how you can actually, by slowly and carefully manipulating the graph, evade these detection systems. And so this should tell you that there is no perfect system out there. So the final category here is what I call access-based methods. So these don't look at how accounts behave, or at least not in a direct fashion, but they look at the fact that a criminal needs to have many accounts and needs to control them in a tight fashion. And so the way that basically accounts and IP addresses interact will be different than real accounts. And so I'll present two papers. One is from us, which is Evil Cohort, used in 2015, and another one is from Facebook, which is SynchroTrack. So the idea behind our Evil Cohort system is that if you are a criminal, you will want accounts to be controlled by a botnet. So you will buy infected computers, you will buy fake accounts, and you make them talk to each other. The reason why you want a botnet is because if you have a single account, if you have a single computer connecting to all of these accounts, it will be trivial for the social network to blacklist it. So you will have multiple computers connected to multiple accounts. This is also important for performance reasons, because infected computers are not on all the time. So if I have malware on my computer, after I'm done teaching here, I shut down my computer. And then if there were some Facebook accounts connected to me, I wouldn't be spamming them anymore. So the criminal can actually use a different computer and so on. So the idea here is that this this forms sort of a community of accounts. If you look at this as a graph. So yeah, you look at how IP addresses connect to accounts, and then you can build a graph where basically the nodes are accounts and the edges are weighted by how many IPs they share, basically. And then we perform community detection on this to detect communities. And the idea is that if you are in a community of accounts that shared many IPs, you are much, much, much more likely to be part of a botnet. So we did this on two different datasets. So we had a webmail dataset, so we could see which webmail accounts sent an email from which IP address over a 5-month period. It was 1.2 billion emails. And here we we reported 1.9 false detection rate. And then we applied it to a social network dataset. So these were 4 smaller social networks. So we worked with a startup that was doing security for smaller social networks at the time. 14 million events and so forth. And we identified 111,000 malicious accounts. And now we don't have ground truth here, so we don't know how many are malicious, but we have plots in the paper showing things like, you know, all these accounts start bursting, start being connected, logged in at the same time, or you know, they have activity patterns that are clearly not human. So if you have a human, you believe you expect to have a, you know, diurnal pattern that sort of goes up during the day, goes down during night, and all of that. These are completely bursting. So you will see that all accounts are active in the middle of the night and then they're never active again, or things like that. So they're clearly suspicious. And the other system is SynchroTrap, which is using a similar idea, but different. So this is from Facebook. And so Facebook, you know, they can see everything that accounts are doing. So their idea is that the criminal will give an order to all the accounts, and all the accounts will do something at the same time. And this something depends on the way that the criminal is monetizing the botnet. So it could be, you know, everybody goes and likes that page because somebody paid the criminal to like that page. Everybody goes and posts a certain message and all of that. But they're not looking at what is being done. They're looking at basically accounts doing it at the same time. And this is what they're actually using in production at Facebook. So they report over 99% precision on their live system. And I would say this is probably the state-of-the-art system in detecting fake accounts at the moment. Or at least the one that has been disclosed to academia, right? Because we don't know what many of these companies are doing, you know, behind the scenes. Now, we talked about fake accounts, and you know, I showed you basically a summary of all the research that has been done in detecting and blocking fake accounts. But you know, after all we've seen, what would you say is the main challenge that these guys are facing when setting up fake accounts? Sorry? Yeah. Yeah, that is a problem. So the problem is similar to what the main problem is similar to what we saw with email spam at the beginning of the lecture. So the fact that the conversion rate is very, very low. So very few people will acknowledge this guy's friend request, for example. Very few people will click on their links and all of that. And the reason for this is that these accounts have no reputation, while on a social network, they are looking for reputation. So you want to see how many likes a page has, or you know, how many friends a person has, and all of that. So criminals really need to overcome this to get accounts that have some reputation, so that more people will actually click on their links, or you know, fall for their scams. And so this can be done in 2 ways. So there are, as I already said, services that boost the reputation of an account. So criminals can pay these services to increase their number of followers, their number of friends, their likes, and whatnot. Or, as Nicholas was saying, they can just use compromised accounts. So suddenly they will not use a fake account anymore, but they will you know, steal your username and password and use your Facebook account as well instead. And this means that, you know, all your friends who typically trust you and you post interesting content all the time, they will be more likely to click on the links that you're posting. So we start quickly by giving you a case study of services that allow you to buy Twitter followers. So we had a paper at IMC on this a few years back. And well, there are these services that you can just go, they tell you can buy 30,000 followers for £9.99 or whatever it might be. And there are different type of services. Some are selling you fake accounts as followers, so that can be interesting if you want to increase your reputation, but it won't be useful if you actually want to sell products to these people, right? Some others sell you real followers. That can be compromised accounts or can be part of pyramid schemes. That this is something we studied. So there are these schemes that you can sign up to on Twitter. So you sign up to the service. You can either pay for followers or you can do it for free. And if you do it for free, you need to authorize an application on your Facebook, on your Twitter account. And this basically gives control of your account to the market operator, right? So what happens is that this person who subscribed to the account suddenly gets followed by a number of people, but since the market operator has control over this person's account, they will also follow a number of people. So they will follow back all these free subscribers, but they will also follow the paid subscriber who actually paid for the service. And by paying for the service, he didn't give control of his account to the market operator, but it's just being followed by people without having to give out the control. And this guy will also start tweeting, advertisement for the marketplace. So, this is a big problem for Twitter, and actually they forbid it in their terms of service. But our idea was, what can we do about this problem? And so, what we did, we created a number of fake accounts, and we purchased followers from the most popular 5 markets. And every time you get followed by somebody, this is a victim, or somebody who gave control of their account to the market operator. And we identified about 70,000 victims. And then we wanted to identify customers, so we did the opposite. We created fake accounts, and we signed up as free subscribers to the market. And we started following a number of people. And then the idea here is that, as I said, we would start tweeting, get more followers, sign up to this service and all of that. And everybody else who was also a victim would start tweeting, but this guy wasn't, and so we could see that this guy was a customer, because they were getting followers without advertising the market, and so on. So we collected a data set of customers as well, about 3,000, if I remember correctly. And then we compared, the differences between random accounts and customers. This is a CDF. We show that customers on average have more followers, which makes sense because they're buying followers online. But then we found out something interesting. So we looked at how their followers change over time. And we find that basically, once they buy followers, the followers are increased over a period of a few days. Because of course, these guys don't want to give you all the followers right away, otherwise Twitter will block them. But then we also see that the followers start decreasing slowly after that. And this is because these guys gave control of their account to the market, but they still have control over their own account. And they might not like what this person is posting. And so a few of them start unfollowing the person. And we find that actually this dynamics never happens for real users. If you look at a real user, the followers will mostly be the same all the time, or increase very slowly. They will never decrease, or very, very rarely decrease. So we built a classifier that actually can detect customers in the wild based on these dynamics. And we have very good results. In fact, we can achieve a 98.4% true positive rate with a 0.02% false negative, false positive, sorry. Yeah, true positive rate and false positive rate of 0.02%, so very, very precise. And this is something that, you know, the markets cannot really change that much, because you know, the only thing they could do is delivering friends, you know, delivering followers in a slower fashion, but then they wouldn't be as appealing anymore, so they would lose customers, because suddenly if I promise you, yes, you will get 10,000 followers, but over a period of a year, you know, maybe you wouldn't be willing to pay that much money for that anymore. Then the second way of actually going around this popularity problem is using compromised accounts. So somebody will steal your Facebook, your Twitter account through a phishing scam, through malware. You know, you might have malware on your computer, and the malware is just sending messages through your Facebook account as you're logged in Facebook. This is something that happens quite often. So there was this browser extension that would change the color of your Facebook. I have no idea why people would install it, but you know, instead of having the blue bar, you could choose the color of that bar. And also it would send messages on your Facebook account without you knowing that. And you know, these were spam messages and whatnot. So, you know, compromised accounts can have a lot of power. So a while ago, the Associated Press Twitter account was compromised, and people posted that, you know, the White House got bombed and all of that. And it was shown that this had an impact on the New York Stock Exchange market, because basically there are high-frequency trading bots crawling Twitter to figure out what's going on in the world. They figured out that something bad was happening, and they started selling stocks or something like that. And then, you know, the market recovered, but this is showing that there is a real effect there. So, you know, they can be used to spread fake news, especially if this is a reputable news account. But they can also be used just to send spam, as I already explained. And there was research showing that people are 10 times more likely to click on dodgy links if they come from their friends. So, you know, if the conversion rate before was 0.01%, now it would be 0.1% or something like that. There is a 10-fold increase, which is very interesting for the criminals. And also, a compromised account has an established network of contacts, so they don't need to start friending people anymore, you know, creating that suspicious activity. They just send a message, and suddenly all the friends will see it, which is quite useful. So in this paper, we developed a system to identify and block compromised accounts. And our insight here is that people develop habits when using social networks, and these habits do not change that much over time. So, for example, if you look at the UCL Twitter account, you know, there is somebody posting during business hours, because it's somebody paid by UCL to do that. So they will post between 8 and 5. Pretty much never post during the night. You know, they will always post from the web, very rarely from Twitter for iPhone. They will always post in English. And even if you look, you know, you look for the hashtags that they use, there are a very small number of hashtags. If you look for the people they mention, there are a very small number of people. Suddenly, if somebody compromises this account and posts, you know, a spam message, this will show a very different behavior. It might be at a very different time. It might be posting. It will probably be posting links to a domain that's completely unrelated. It might even be in a different language. Why not? So this is the idea of our system. So we will basically build a behavioral model by using one-class SVMs of how an account typically behaves. And then we monitor any message sent by the account. And if a message is benign, so matches the behavioral model, will basically update our behavioral model and then let it post as if nothing happened. But if a message is actually coming from someone else who compromised your account, we will detect it as violating this model, and then the message will not be posted on the feed. And so we tested our system, on a very large data set, but we have some case studies. So we basically were able to identify that the Associated Press Twitter account, this tweet was malicious, mostly because two features were suspicious. So this was posted from the web, while these guys usually use professional tweeting applications like Social Flow and all of that. And also there was no URL, while every single new the Burger King Twitter account was compromised and announced that they had been sold to McDonald's, things like that. The Skype Twitter account as well was compromised by the Syrian Electronic Army, so these activists who posted saying that Microsoft is monitoring your accounts, selling data to governments, don't use them and stuff like that. The interesting bit is that this was 1st of January, so nobody was in the office to delete this tweet. So this tweet stayed there for a day at least. So this is interesting because if we had actually an automated system able to detect this, we could actually block. And then we evaluated the system on a very large scale data set. So we crawled 10% of all the tweets for a period of, I don't remember, a year or something. So it was 1.4 billion tweets. And we identified over 300,000 compromised accounts. And then we had a data set on Facebook, 106 million status updates, and we identified over 11,000 compromised accounts. So this was in 2012. This was an old data set from 2008. So probably criminals hadn't started using compromised accounts that much yet, but they still, were using some. And then our false positives are between 3.6% and 0.5%, and this depends a lot on the account. So it depends both on how consistent the account is in their behavior. Of course, somebody who's changing what they're doing all the time will not be as easy to model. And also on the history of the user's activity. But what we show is that high-profile accounts, like news agencies and whatnot, are typically extremely consistent. So there we have a 0% false positive rate. So every time there is something weird going on, we would be able to actually identify it and block it. Any questions? No? Okay. So I think I still have a couple of minutes. So this is mostly what I wanted to tell you, but then I have a lot of other slides because I wasn't sure how fast I would go through them. So I will just tell you about some other things that maybe these deal more with the human aspect of fraud. We talked about accounts, we talked about compromises and automated detection of this, but the flip side of this is, why do people actually fall for this type of scams? And well, there are a number of reasons here. So, for example, in the case of phishing, you will have an email from Facebook telling you that you have to reset your password. You click on it, you will go to a website that exactly looks like Facebook. There will be some cues that do not match. So, for example, if you look at the certificate, the HTTPS certificate, it will not match Facebook and all of that. But actually, research showed that 23% of the users do not look at that. They look at what's bigger. So if you have a big Facebook logo, if the color scheme matches and all of that, people will actually believe that. And they will be more likely to fall for the scam. So this is something you should keep in mind because, yes, we are blocking accounts and all of that, but we are likely not blocking all of them. And those that we are not blocking, people will still fall for them. And why is that? There was another paper that showed that if you give people a fake account and a real account, they are not always able to distinguish them. Some fake accounts are actually very, very good in looking legitimate. You know, the main indicator there is really if you receive a friend request from someone you don't know, that's likely to be a fake account. But if you are just provided two accounts that have no connection to you, it's not that easy to know if they are real or not. And then there are some other key elements. So there is time pressure. So you could receive a spam message saying, this is a deal that will end today or something like that. So you are more likely to actually go for it because it is something that you really want, and it's putting a time pressure on you. And this is particularly important in other types of scams. So in spear phishing, for example. So if somebody is sending you a message pretending to be your boss, will say, okay, I need this very urgently because we need to close this deal or something like that, and you will not think about it too much. You will not check that this is actually your boss, or check that the email address is correct and all that. You will just respond and give away some information, for example. And something else that scammers use is actually make you feel good about yourself. So if you receive a Nigerian scam, they will say, "Oh, I chose you because you are a reliable and honest person. I know that, and I can trust you, and all of that." And so that makes you feel well. And then you need to put this money in this account by today, so time pressure again. And so these things sort of stack up. And this is how people fall for scams. So yeah, I think I'm out of time. How does it work? Should we go for coffee? Should we?